From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hi, everybody. Rory Johnston in the OpenLine chair here on News Channel 5 tonight. It's Tuesday night, and we're going to be talking guns and gun laws tonight. Always gets a lot of your phone calls. You know how it works, 737+. We'd like you to call in to share your opinion and ask questions of our expert guest. He is a regular guest here after a busy day in the law office. John Harris is with us. John, good to see you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Executive Director of the Tennessee Firearms Association. He's with us for the next hour. So please, folks, give us a call, 737-7587. And John, let me just ask you, one of the first things I want to talk about, obviously July 1st has passed, new laws are in effect.
Absolutely they are.
For the past month or so. In Georgia, our neighboring state, a lot of people have talked about this law in Georgia that is, the critics call it the guns everywhere law. But tell us a little bit about this law there in Georgia and what they've done.
Well, what they've really done is they've gotten rid of a lot of the restrictions that impact where people can legally carry firearms, and it's actually a move Tennessee is making, but very, very slowly.
Right.
Georgia's just made a big step real quick. And
why do you think they did that?
I think they're starting to realize, you know, because if you look, Florida, for example, has had open carry almost 30 years now. Lots of states have had it. Tennessee's had it 20 years now. And the legislatures are starting to realize that people want that flexibility, and that giving the flexibility to people, particularly the ones that have gone and gotten the permits, doesn't create any increase in the crime rates. And so there's a willingness, and you hear it among some of the more conservative Tennessee legislators, to start relaxing these restrictions.
Okay, first of all, let's define our terms. Open carry.
Open carry means that you're transporting a firearm without having to have it concealed in a purse or in a holster so that it's not visible. Think of an undercover cop. They're armed, but you don't know it.
Right.
And the other term you see is concealed carry, and that's what most citizens tend to do, is they've got the guns like the undercover cop where you can't see it, and then open carry is just the inverse. It's where
whether it's, you know, a under the arm carry or
shoulder
back
holster,
here, down in the, wherever it may be.
They can hide them in a lot of places.
Hide them in a lot of places, exactly. Or a woman who will have it in her purse.
But they've got a lot more options than men do.
That's true. Okay, so when you say flexibility, what kind of flexibility does this give gun owners?
For example, in Tennessee, there are places that are off limits, that have been off limits in the past, some of them that aren't anymore. Like parking lots at restaurants used to be off limits if they sold alcohol. You couldn't even park in the parking lot. Well, what you see is a trend in Tennessee, and it's moving faster in other states, to get rid of a lot of these restrictions that really have no impact on preventing crime. They just create a nuisance and a headache and a burden for people who are trying to be good law-abiding citizens but want to provide for their own self-defense.
And what do you say to the critics who say this is just, it is creating more chaos and more of a danger?
Well, it really, statistically, there's no evidence that it does.
Right.
Because the people that are going to commit crimes and misbehave with guns, they don't care if you have the law in the first place. And all these laws, therefore, tend to do is to restrict and create problems for people that aren't likely or even inclined to commit a crime.
If there is no real evidence, where does all this come from? All, you know, the stories that we hear and the fear that's out there about.
Well, some of it's wives' tales. You know, you've heard that, for example, we ran the restaurant issue for 14 years, which was essentially guns in restaurants that served alcohol. And you know, you had these wives' tales, if you want to call them that, or superstitions, or just plain old falsehoods that say guns and alcohol don't mix. Well, that assumes people going into those restaurants like Old Charlie's go in to get drunk and lose all inhibitions. And they don't do that. Nobody really frequently misbehaves in those kind of restaurants. Other states like Arkansas don't even restrict consumption of alcohol in possession of a firearm unless you reach a standard that's DUI, where you would get a ticket for driving a vehicle. They'll issue you a ticket for possessing a gun in that state.
Which is pretty low now,
well, yeah, they keep moving it down.
0.8 is, you know, depending on the type of person you are and what, you know, you can get there pretty quickly. You have to be real careful.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, what about the reaction in Georgia? How has it been that you know of? I mean, do you talk to counterparts there?
I do, not frequently, but I do have counterparts down in Georgia that I deal with, and they see it as a great victory on the pro-gun side. And when it passed, those in opposition to it, you know, what they tend to do is what they tend to do here is they say the passage of this law is going to result in blood in the streets and chaos and mayhem. And unfortunately, it never does for their argument, because every time they make the argument and it doesn't come about, then they lose credibility.
Right. Let's go right to the phones. We want to get your phone calls in, and if you'd like to call in, we have open lines at 737+. John Harris is with us. Julie's called in. Hi, Julie.
Hello.
Hi, what's on your mind?
Yes, I called in because I would like to make a comment about the gun laws.
Okay, go ahead.
My comment is that I feel that we could help curb some of the illegal guns that are sort of floating around if we make it somehow stricter on the good old boy system when someone's getting rid of their gun, or about trading guns, or you know, giving a gun away, because I think a lot of times that's how it gets in the wrong hands in the past, and the shootings, yes.
Okay, so you're just talking about accessibility?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, let's listen to what John has to say. Kind of a broad statement.
It is a broad statement, and she makes the comment, uses the term illegal guns. And as a practical matter, there aren't really very many illegal guns. There's very few firearms that are illegal for the citizen to own. We can own machine guns in this state, in this country, fully automatics. You pay the tax, you can own it. I think what she's really talking about is this, like we were talking before her call, this false perception that restricting access to weapons effectively curbs crime. And states and countries that have implemented that much fuller than our country is likely to ever do, like England bans civilian ownership. It's heavily restricted over there. It hasn't curbed crime. The guns are still available to the people that commit the crimes. What they've done is they've disarmed the potential victims from being able to defend themselves. So, you know, you're not going to effectively keep the guns out of the hands of people by requiring background checks or other restrictions.
But do you think that's reasonable to require? I mean, we've had these shootings, mass shootings, and really the focus has been on mental health.
Right, it has been.
You know, that obviously that we've got to keep any weapon, whether it be knives, anything that can hurt someone else, in the hands of people who are just not capable mentally of handling dangerous weapons.
Well, and interestingly, in almost all of the multi-victim mass shootings, the shootings occurred by people who possessed guns that they legally acquired. And so unless you figure out how to predict who's likely to commit a crime, or who in fact has an undiagnosed mental illness, there's not going to be an effective means, without infringing the rights of others, to somehow restrict or limit access to those weapons. And so we just don't have that technology.
Let's use the Aurora, Colorado, a tragedy, the shooting in the theater. In your argument, would you say that if there was a permit carry a gun owner in the audience who had a gun, there's no guarantee, but there's a chance that person could have stopped the gunman sooner before more bloodshed?
Absolutely, because at about the time that Aurora took place in the Northwest, there was a mall shooting that happened on a similar format.
Yeah, I remember that, because we were on OpenLine.
We were on that night, and there were, I think, 2 injuries in that, and an armed citizen intervened and stopped it. So the ability to throw up some resistance, as Nikki Gozer will say when she stood by and watched her husband murdered at a shooting several years ago here in town. There's a huge difference between having the capacity to intervene and stop or defend yourself and just being a sitting duck and a victim.
Right.
So you never know, but certainly armed citizens in the Aurora theaters could have at least leveled the playing field somewhat, if not effectively intervened, The problem is we never know, so it's all suspicion as to what may or may not have happened.
Critics would say, but that would also create even more havoc with now bullets flying both ways and more people could get hurt.
Well, that's potentially true, and citizens who go through the Tennessee's permitting courses, for example, are specifically taught, and the law in Tennessee specifically says if you are in justifiable use of self-defense, whether it's a knife, a gun, whatever, and you're defending yourself against an attack and you somehow injure another person or cause harm, you're still responsible for that other injury.
Yeah.
And it can be responsibility not just civilly but criminally, because it could be reckless endangerment, for example. And so there's a mitigating factor there that responsible gun owners are taught, that you can't just whip it out and start firing at everybody.
Yeah.
It's not a spray and pray situation.
Right.
You know, you've got to have some reasonable amount of training.
Sure. Makes good sense. All right, we're going to take our first break, everybody. We want to thank Julie for the call. Wide open line, 737+. Want to know what you think about gun laws and gun ownership in Tennessee with John Harris. We'll be right back.